Buy, borrow, and die. Those are the three-step strategy that the top 1% of wealthy Americans are using to accumulate their wealth. So with that said, I appreciate you watching my video. Just kidding. Warren Buffett, an American billionaire, paid 20% in capital gains tax rate, which was far less taxes than his personal secretary, who paid 35% of the marginal tax rate. It actually became a national headline for a while back in 2011, and this video is not a debate about how we should tax billionaires. I'll leave that to you in the comment section down below. And President Obama, during the State of the Union address back in 2011, called for comprehensive tax reform to require millionaires and billionaires to pay a minimum of 30% of the effective tax rate each year. And needless to say, the bill died and it wasn't talked about again. But I do want to play you this video clip from ABC News in 2011, what Warren Buffett said about the tax rates.
In 2010, Bosonic paid a nearly 36% tax rate. Buffett, who made $62 million that year, paid less than half of that.
House Speaker Boehner was asked about the Buffett rule, and he said, well, we all know that there's a
reason we have low rates on capital gains. That's because it spurs new investment in our economy.
He's wrong. I mean, people like to make money in investing, and they make it if the tax rate's 15% in share, and if they make it if the tax rate's 30% in share.
Buffett made about triple what GOP candidate Mitt Romney made in 2010. Yet Romney has been taken to task by some for his tax rate.
I don't blame Governor Romney for paying the tax rate he paid. I blame the U.S. Congress.
Debbie is technically a W-2 employee for Berkshire Hathaway who works directly for Warren Buffett. She has to pay her income tax to the IRS under the ordinary income tax brackets of 10, 12, 22, 24, 32, 35, or 37% in marginal tax rates. Warren Buffett is the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, which is a holding company that owns hundreds of businesses in the energy, utilities, insurance, manufacturing, service, and retails like Dairy Queen, RC Willey, See's Candies, Duracell, and Geico. Berkshire Hathaway also has ownership stakes in Coca-Cola, American Express, Apple, Chevron, GM, and Verizon. But according to the SEC filings from Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett only earns $100,000 a year in annual salary from the company as a W-2 employee under the C Corporation pay structure. And Berkshire Hathaway is structured as a C corporation and is strictly paid on a salary basis. Let's forget about his net worth for a second. And he doesn't need that big of a salary like many other CEOs do because his company Berkshire Hathaway can pay for most of his expenses. In order for any expenses to qualify as business expenses, the cost has to be ordinary and necessary in the eyes of the IRS. So any expenses that I have now in my home office are fully deductible because they're all ordinary and necessary to make YouTube videos, right? So if Warren Buffett's only income is from Berkshire Hathaway, he's paying about 11.4% in effective tax rate under the joint filing tax rates. But obviously that's not his only stream of income. His company is set to make over $4.8 billion in dividend income for the year 2023, and the qualified dividend tax rates are 0, 15, or 20%, as well as the 3.8% net investment income tax. So his tax rates are significantly lower than his secretary Debbie because not only does he only make $100,000 from Berkshire Hathaway, but most of his expenses are considered business expenses paid for by Berkshire Hathaway, and any shares that he sells are taxed as long-term capital gains tax rates. But why am I telling you about Warren Buffett and his personal secretary Debbie? Because most Americans pay taxes like Debbie, while a small percentage of Americans pay their taxes like Warren Buffett. The buy, borrow, die strategy is what multimillionaires and billionaires use to reduce their taxable income. Can someone like you and me use this strategy? Absolutely. The first step is to buy assets like stocks, bonds, mutual funds, real estate, and other securities. This is the step that everyone is on right now. If you have a 401k, you're buying assets inside your 401k. If you have a taxable brokerage account, then you're buying securities inside a taxable brokerage account. You're in the buy phase of the buy, borrow, die strategy. When you buy your first house to live in it, that's an asset that you're going to hold for several years. if not indefinitely, right? And some of you want to go above and beyond by buying residential and commercial properties to build your wealth. One of the fastest ways to grow wealth, in my opinion, is by buying real estate. Not only does the property appreciate in value that can build equity over time, but you get many tax breaks to write off the depreciation and any expenses that incur inside the property. But you don't want to just buy any properties, right? You want to buy something that can generate cash flow so that the property has some value to it. When you put a 20% down payment on a, let's say $300,000 investment property for $60,000, and you're making $400 a month in net rental income, then your cash and cash return is 8% annually. If the rent goes up by 1% annually, your investment return goes up by 1% annually because your mortgage payment remains the same for 15 or 30 years. But you have to make sure you buy something that will give you a positive cash flow, or it's gonna become a more of a liability than an asset. If you don't want to do real estate, then that's fine too. Just by maxing out your retirement contributions between 401k, IRA, and HSA as a single person at $32,850 every year for the next 30 years with an 8% annualized return, you could have over $4.3 million invested. And let's say you invest $1,000 every 2 weeks in something like a dividend paying portfolio with an 8% annualized return with dividend reinvestments, you would have over $1.2 million in 20 years. And in 20 years, you could just live on the dividends that your portfolio generates, right? And don't forget to download my financial independence resources, including all these spreadsheets I just showed you, for absolutely free by visiting firesetchat.com/contact. You should also check out my Fireside Chat shop to check out the books and equipment I use at firesetchat.com/shopping. I'm also launching a new live stream program on my channel, which will include live Q&As, group coaching sessions, and private coaching sessions about the FIRE movement, stock market, real estate, and any current events in the world. With the private membership program, you'll have access to my private Facebook group and group coaching sessions to discuss your financial independence journey. You can check out my YouTube channel for more information about the private membership program. You can also schedule a free one-on-one 20-minute financial coaching session by visiting firesetchat.com/coaching to discuss your personal finances. Once you've purchased appreciating assets like stocks, bonds, and real estate, the next step is to borrow against them. What people do is basically leverage their assets as collateral to borrow money while preserving the value of the underlying assets. If you sell your assets, then you don't own these assets anymore, and you will most likely have to pay capital gains tax on the profit you make, right? But when you borrow against these assets, you're not on the hook to pay capital gains or ordinary income tax because you're essentially borrowing from your own assets. For real estate, you have the option to open a home equity line of credit or HELOC to borrow against the equity in your home or the down payment you made on an investment property. You can check out this video about the HELOC linked in the description below. Most people use it for the cost of, let's say, home improvement, and the IRS even allows you to deduct interest paid on the HELOC if the funds are used to buy, build, or improve your home. The other reason for HELOC is to have liquidity or additional cash reserve to make additional asset purchases instead of tapping into your own cash reserve. For your stock investment portfolio, you have the option to open what's called a securities-based lines of credit or SBLOC to borrow against the value of your investment portfolio. And keep in mind that both HELOC and SBLOC will charge you variable interest rates. I have a detailed video on the SBLOC link in the description below. This is not the same as the margin loan because SBLOC or SBLOC doesn't allow you to purchase additional securities or pay down margin loans. You gain access to this line of credit to buy a new home or pay for your lifestyle. Keep in mind that the SBLOC can only be used for your taxable brokerage account and not your retirement accounts. However, you should be very careful not to bite more than you can chew. If you over leverage your assets, you can deal with the consequences of repaying a massive amount of debt. You want to make sure to understand the risks associated with HELOC, SBLOC, or any other loans that you use your assets as collateral. They're both revolving credit lines that come with significant risks if you don't have the cash reserve to repay them. I strongly encourage you to check out those videos that will explain in detail how they work in your favor and sometimes against your favor to build your wealth. Personally, I'm not taking out any HELOC to make home improvements because I think it's more risk-free to just replenish my cash reserve. I am just not a fan of using my own house as collateral to borrow money. I'm also not looking to use SBLOC until I reach at least $2 million in my taxable investment portfolio. Most brokers I've talked to allow their clients to borrow up to 50% of the value of equities. So if I had $2 million in my portfolio, then I could gain access to $1 million in a line of credit as long as the value of my portfolio does not drop. However, if we experience a bear market again at a negative 20% return, then my portfolio would drop from $2 million to $1.6 million, right? Then my line of credit would drop from $1 million to $800,000. If I use too much of my SBLOC, the broker could do what's called a maintenance call or a collateral call to make me repay some or all of the loan principal. If I don't have the cash available, then the broker could force me to liquidate my portfolio to repay the loan. This is something I want you to keep in mind before you decide to borrow against your assets. And because these are borrowed assets, I'm not liable to pay any taxes from the cash I take out from these loans. These lines of credit don't sell any investments inside my portfolio. They just borrow against the assets I own, right? So as long as the values remain intact, the credit lines will remain the same or they will go up higher as my portfolio grows bigger over time. Now I could use the cash from SBLOC to purchase vacation or rental properties, start a new business, or possibly invest in other businesses. The income I potentially generate from these assets could repay the interest of the SBLOC in the long term. It's kind of like a never-ending cycle if I do it right. Am I gonna do this with less than $1 million? Probably not. I wanna make sure I have the cash reserve to repay the loans in full if I have to. And I also wanna make sure that I'm not over leveraging my assets so that I don't end up having more liabilities than assets. And the next step is to die. I know that sounds terrible to say, but death is inevitable for all of us. When I die, my estate goes to my heirs or whomever I designate as my beneficiaries. The loans that I borrow when I was alive are immediately paid off with the remaining assets I had. And then the assets get what's called a step-up cost basis when I pass my assets to my beneficiaries. When they get my assets, their current cost basis in the asset is the market price at the time of my death. If my assets appreciated a lot, the step-up cost basis could save my beneficiaries tens of thousands of dollars, if not millions in taxes. For example, if my stock portfolio was at $10 million at the time of my death, but the cost basis was $5 million, that means I would have $5 million in unrealized long-term capital gains. When I pass the assets to my beneficiary, their new cost basis would become $10 million, saving them $5 million in taxable profit. They would save 20% in capital gains tax on the $5 million profit. And Congress has tried to repeal the step-up cost basis in the past, but I doubt it'll ever go away. This is another reason for me to hold the assets forever and ever. And if you want to know more about how to invest in your future, be sure to check out these two videos. So with that said, I appreciate you watching my video. Don't forget to subscribe and I hope to see you in the next video. Have a good one.